Hello, you Scribblers. This is part two of. I'm not sure how long this series is going to be. It depends on how long we decide we want to go for. This may take place over multiple recording sessions, depending on how much we or how long we talk about this. One of the beauties of this is that we don't really have a time limit, so we can sort of go as long as we need to. In any case, without further ado, let's get back to where we were at. So where did we leave off?
Well, we left off with my pointing out that that in 1944 the Jews were being rounded up by the Hungarians. But in order to understand how things developed, I need to explain a little bit of what was going on in our lives prior between the 1942 period and the 1944 period. My mother had a cousin. Her name was Ellie, and she had a young son who was just about my age, within a couple of months of my age, just slightly older. And she was married to a rabbi who believed that the whole in what do I want to say, the persecution of the Jews could not go on, because after all, Jews were very highly regarded in Germany, and he didn't want to believe that they would ultimately come after the Jews in the rest of the world. She disagreed with him so much that she ultimately took her son and moved out.
Mm-hmm.
Ellie, and her son moved in with us, my mother and I, and me, into our one-bedroom apartment, and stayed there until the roundup occurred. So I actually had a good friend who lived with us. We became very good friends. He was just enough older that he was able to go to school, and I was just below the age of school age. So they would not take me until, because my birthday is at the end of September, and school there started at the beginning of September, so they would not take me until the following year. In any case, my mother and Ellie packed up a very large trunk of all the clothes and valuable belongings that they thought they could take with them when the Germans or Hungarians came to take us away. We knew that this was going to happen, but had no idea when it would happen, and weren't absolutely certain that it would. But if it did happen, there were assurances that they would let us take our belongings with us. Of course, this was total nonsense, because what the Germans and the Hungarians were doing is they were simply taking those trunks of clothes and valuables and keeping them, and they were not shipping those along with the. They would take them along to the brickyard. They would be left in the brickyard and then broken down into various things. And later on, I saw some of the valuables in a very different form. But early one morning in April, I was sitting at the kitchen, in the kitchen, having breakfast, facing my mother, who was at the sink washing some dishes, and directly in front of her was a window. And as I looked, as I was watching her, I could see that two of the gendarmes, as they were referred to,
Gendarme, yeah.
this is an elite police force that the Hungarians had. They wore green uniforms with plumes in their caps, and they walked by our window. Two of them walked by our window, and we knew that 2 doors down there was an older single Jewish woman, and I immediately said, "Mother, look." And she looked out the window just in time to see the second of these policemen go by. And I said, "They're going a couple of doors down to take the woman," so it was obvious that the roundup of the Jews was beginning at this point.
Mm-hmm.
My mother quickly alerted Ellie and her son and said that, "You two boys, grab your coats, get out of the house, go to the house of an aunt of mine who lived about half a mile away, and we would follow. Well, we will follow you. Ellie and I will follow you as quickly as we can. We've got to get some clothes on and get out of the apartment."
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we got out, and as what I really meant was that fortunately they also got out just a couple of minutes before these police came back to our apartment to take us away.
Mm-hmm.
As we went downstairs, Joseph and I went downstairs, and we saw that there was a two-wheel wooden cart with several people standing around, a lot of luggage packed in there. No horses, no mules, nothing to pull the cart, so it was obvious that the intention was for the people to pull the cart to the brick factory.
Uh-huh.
That was about 3 miles away. And we ran in the direction of my aunt's house and an uncle's house. And even though Krushitsa was not particularly populated by German soldiers, there were a few around. And we came across 4 of them walking toward us. We have our our yellow stars showing on our coats, and we quickly turned around and ran in the other direction, hopefully to go around the block in the other direction. We turned our coats in such a way that the stars were not showing, and hid in a doorway until the Germans walked by. They didn't seem particularly interested in us. They were just some soldiers who were stationed there and were walking along the street.
Uh-huh.
This was about 9 in the morning. Nothing unusual that they were out and about, just taking a walk, perhaps maybe going for coffee somewhere. Hard to tell what their intention was. They were not interested in the Jews particularly. Um, we did reach my aunt and uncle's house, only to find they actually had a house. We were living in an apartment, but they had a house that they were able to lease. But when we got there, the door of the house was sealed with a wire seal and a wax impression that they put on it
Uh-huh.
to show that they had been there and had sealed the house. So that part of the city, apparently the Hungarian officers, or the police rather, were already there, and they had taken my aunt and uncle, and they were some of the people who were taken to the brickyard. We had nowhere to go, so we waited there for several minutes. And sure enough, my mother and Ellie showed up, and they, as we, were very surprised that there was there was nobody there, and we had nowhere to go at that point.
Uh-huh.
So we decided that the best possibility, or really the only possibility, is that there is a large, or at that time anyway, there was a very large grassy park in the middle of the city. We walked over there. My mother tore off all four of our stars and tried to hide the sewing marks as much as possible. And we sat on a bench in the park for some time, trying to decide what can we possibly do to avoid being found here and being taken along with the rest.
Uh-huh.
After about just before noon, I would say, somewhere around 11 o'clock, my mother said, well, I have to go back to the house, to the apartment rather, because all of the money and jewelry that we have that we could use as a way of finding or paying somebody to help us out is in the apartment. In addition to that, we don't have any extra clothes.
Uh-huh.
We only had the clothes that we were wearing. Winter comes, as I said, winter comes pretty early there, but it lasts also quite late. So even though it was April, it was still cold enough that we were wearing coats.
Uh-huh.
And there was no snow on the ground anymore, but it was very cold. All of the three of us begged my mother not to be foolish enough to try to go back to the apartment where she very likely would be caught. But she insisted that she had to do that because there was no other way for us to get away. So indeed, she went to the apartment, took a key and broke we had a similar wire and wax seal on our door.
Uh-huh.
By the time she got there, so they had gone into the apartment and had seen that we weren't there. In any case, she broke the seal, went in, grabbed a couple of extra changes of clothing for all of us, put them into a small shopping bag, took whatever money and jewelry she could get into her purse, and came back to the park. Fortunately, this happened with absolutely no interference by anybody. By that time, the Jews that were being gathered together had gone away or had gone in toward the brick farm.
Uh-huh.
And so we in the park wound up as carefully as we could putting on 2 more layers of clothing, trying to be, we hid behind trees so we could get extra underwear and extra clothing on, because we couldn't carry a suitcase. That would make it a very obvious.
Yeah.
Or any kind of luggage, because that would make it very obvious that
you were refugees
trying to get somewhere. So this way we looked a little bit bulky, but not too unusual.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately for us, my mother had previously had some contact with people who knew of of 2 men who were running sort of an underground railroad, as it was. That's the term that was used during the Civil War here in the United States to get blacks from
the south to the north.
To the north. But they were running this kind of an operation to get people away from wherever they were well known. Our intention was, since we were now, remember that even though this started out being part of Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia,
uh-huh.
That when the Germans interfered, we became part of Hungary. The separation between Hungary and the Slovak area was a very small river, but that was the border that they chose, and our intention was to go across the river into Slovakia.
Uh-huh.
Now, why even do that? Well, a couple of reasons. One, when Czechoslovakia was created, my mother's parents and whoever was, and one of their other daughters were actually in Slovakia about 80 kilometers away. And so the idea was that even though we weren't sure that it would be any safer there than where we were, we knew that to get away from where we were well known and where there were any records of our existence, that we would stand a better chance of being in a foreign country where there were no records of us. And so what we did after getting all the clothes and all of the things that we gathered together, we then went off to the place that my mother believed was the house where these 2 men were, from which they were operating, and from there tried to negotiate some kind of a deal to get us into Slovakia. Okay, let me pause there. I think we've got a lot more to discuss. So why don't we quit for now?
Okay.
This is a good stopping point, because from here on, if I go on, it'll be another 2 hours. So let's quit here, and then you can just point out that when we continue, what we're going to discuss is how we actually, that we did get across the border, and it was all, there were also, not only was our escape from the apartment a very narrow one, but there were some narrow escapes that we went through in our crossing over into Slovakia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that is the end of part 2. I realized that this one was a little bit shorter than part 1. However, we're sort of going off of my grandfather George's schedule here. We're going to be having more of these talks in the near future, so expect a few more parts. I mean, we have at least another couple of hours worth of material here, at minimum. So there's still going to be a lot coming our way. I should probably pull up the webcam so you guys can actually see me. So, thank you guys for listening, and I really hope you guys have enjoyed this talk with George Greenwald, my grandfather, and one of the closest people and most influential people in my life. If it wasn't for him, I probably would not be doing this at all. In any case, thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next video.